Just check, we now have Councillor Allison. We have Councillor Anderson, Councillor Barker, Councillor Chalmers, Councillor Clark. I have apologies from Councillor Cooper. Just check, yes, we have Councillor Dewar. Check if we've got Councillor Equi. We don't seem to have Councillor Equi. We have apologies from Councillor Fagan. We have Councillor Gowland, Councillor Hamilton. I'll check if we've got Councillor Keat. Yes, he's joined the meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Lambie. We have Councillor Lockhart. We have Councillor Loudon, Councillor Marsh. We have apologies from Councillor Leslie MacDonald. We have Councillor McDougall, Councillor Nugent, Councillor Ray. I'll check if we've got Councillor Razak. We don't seem to have Councillor Razak. We have Councillor Robb, Councillor Ross, Councillor Scott. I know Councillor Thompson had technical issues. I'll just check if he's in the meeting. Yes, he is. And we have Councillor Toner. I'll check if we've got Councillor Walker. We don't seem to have Councillor Walker, and we have Councillor Williams. And with that, I'll hand you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you very much. I should note before we begin the business that this is Kevin Carr's first meeting of the Climate Change Committee since beginning his new role, so congratulations. Moving now to the first item on the agenda, the declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Not seeing any. Okay, so we'll move to item number 2, the minutes of the previous meeting. Those are on pages 5 to 12 of the pack. I'll move those as a correct record. Do we have any comments or questions regarding those? Not seeing any.
Happy to second them.
Okay. Okay, so moving now to item number 3. This is a Just Transition in South Lanarkshire preliminary evidence report. And I'll invite Adam Wallace to do an introduction prior to Sage Coons delivering her presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to welcome Sage along to Climate Change and Sustainability Committee today. You may remember she was here last year to present some of the initial outline for the research. She's back again today to update on the progress of that research. The research is currently in the survey phase, so there's a survey going out across South Lanarkshire, and the presentation today is going to go over some of those preliminary findings and an update on the progress of the research. So I'll pass over to Sage now.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for having me back to speak with you today. For those of you I haven't already met, my name is Sage Coons, and I'm a PhD student at Glasgow Caledonian University studying climate justice, and I work alongside the Council on this research on just transition. My focus remains on understanding and addressing vulnerability amid South Lanarkshire's just transition to net zero, with the aim of informing policy interventions that are both effective and equitable. And since I last presented to this committee, my research has moved from data collection to analysis of the qualitative data. Today, I'll be sharing findings from the vulnerability assessment, as well as some preliminary insights on housing and transport. Finally, I'll discuss how this evidence will be integrated into the LDP3 and other strategies. This research was developed in collaboration with South Lanarkshire Council to support your ongoing commitment to achieving net zero by 2045. And the overarching aim is to assess vulnerability and adaptive capacity in relation to climate change, identifying where communities are most at risk and how they can be best supported through fair and inclusive transition policies. To do this, I've continued to use a participatory action research framework, engaging residents, community organizations, council employees, and councillors through interviews and focus groups. These discussions reveal not only where vulnerabilities exist, but how people experience and understand them in their daily lives. And I'll begin by sharing some findings on climate vulnerability in South Lanarkshire. Vulnerability, as we have come to understand it, is multifaceted, shaped by both social and physical dimensions. Social vulnerability reflects demographic, economic, and institutional conditions like age, health, income, education, and access to resources. Physical vulnerability, on the other hand, refers to exposure to hazards like flooding, extreme temperatures, or infrastructure failure. And these two dimensions can interact in many ways. For example, rural isolation can heighten exposure to flooding or extreme weather, but it's a social context that determines how deeply those events affect people. This framework is organized around three key components: exposure, or the degree to which communities face climate hazards; sensitivity, how strongly these hazards affect people's health, livelihoods, and well-being; and adaptive capacity, or their ability to prepare for, respond to, and recover from these impacts. And while exposure and sensitivity are largely environmental, adaptive capacity is where local policy has the greatest influence. But for policy to be effective, it must acknowledge that climate impacts are not distributed evenly. Rather, they reflect existing patterns of inequality. Economic vulnerability remains a strong determinant. Low-income households are more likely to live in older, energy-inefficient homes, experience fuel poverty, and lack the resources for insurance or repair after extreme weather events. Demographic factors such as age, disability, and health status also shape outcomes. Elderly residents, for instance, face compounded risks from both cold winters and increasingly hot summers, particularly in poorly ventilated homes. Institutional and societal factors play a key role as well. Where local networks and civic engagement are strong, resilience improves. Where trust in institutions or access to information is limited, vulnerability deepens. Many participants described rural isolation as a recurring theme. Limited transport options can restrict access to healthcare, employment, and social connection, while also complicating emergency response during extreme weather events. And what's clear is that vulnerability is not rarely experienced alongside a single axis. Instead, several factors intersect to amplify risk. These patterns of vulnerability are already visible on the ground. Flooding was the most frequently reported impact among participants, affecting gardens, parks, and transport links, often worsened by outdated drainage infrastructure. According to one community group member in Clydesdale, they said that we rely on a Victorian drainage system. There's lots of towns and cities which are so poorly maintained. And if you're going to have increased weather events, which will put more demands on the drainage, it's going to cause more problems in terms of local flooding. Temperature change was also a recurring concern. Gardeners and community groups described shifts in growing seasons with increasingly hot summers. Other participants noted that Scottish homes were simply not built to cope with prolonged heat, making indoor conditions unsafe for elderly and infirm residents. In short, climate impacts are not a distant threat. They are already shaping daily life across South Lanarkshire. Let's first examine how this impacts the housing sector. Participants identified several barriers to achieving a just housing transition, which can be broadly grouped into infrastructural, financial, governance, and awareness barriers. First of all, infrastructural barriers relate to the age, condition, and energy efficiency of the housing stock. Much of South Lanarkshire's housing is old, with many properties predating 1946. As one retrofit specialist noted, the people themselves are resilient, but the housing stock is crumbling. These homes are poorly insulated, increasingly prone to damp and mold, and ill-suited for the temperature extremes that we are now experiencing and will continue to experience. Moving on to financial barriers, these include high retrofit costs, housing affordability, and fuel poverty. 22% of South Lanarkshire's residents live in fuel poverty, lower than the national average, but still a significant number of people. The key concern here is ensuring that the financial burden of decarbonization is not placed on those least able to afford it. Governance barriers arise in conservation areas and mixed tenure housing, where responsibility for retrofit is often unclear. Additionally, the complicated and costly accreditation process for home retrofitters is prohibitive for local organizations who are seeking to take direct action within their communities to tackle fuel poverty. And finally, awareness barriers reflect uncertainty about roles and accountability, who acts, who pays, and who benefits. This is a consequence of a lack of effective communication and education on climate change and local resources. Together, these barriers highlight that building resilience in the housing sector requires both technological and social solutions, expanding affordable, energy-efficient housing while empowering residents through engagement and education. Similar barriers also appear in transport. Infrastructural and governance challenges persist in rural areas where limited public transport increases social isolation and restricts access to work and services. Unsuitable infrastructure also creates safety concerns for commuters, with one participant sharing that they don't feel safe cycling in their community because of cars. However, it can be costly to expand cycle paths, making it difficult for the council to target safety interventions. Such financial barriers also expand to bus routes and limit the council's ability to expand these bus routes, according to one councillor. Future directions here include developing mobility hubs, local centers that integrate buses, trains, bicycles, community services, and other shared mobility options. This measure simultaneously promotes community engagement, emission reduction, and active travel, all of which are important elements of a just transition. Moving on to the policy implications of these findings. Coordination is crucial to the success of a just transition. The key takeaway here is that climate adaptation cannot be achieved through technical measures alone. While physical resilience is important, these measures must be complemented by social and institutional resilience, like access to information, inclusive participation, and equitable resource distribution. A justice-oriented approach to climate policy means ensuring that the transition to net zero addresses the structural inequalities that make some groups more vulnerable than others. In the housing sector, this entails implementation of a fabric-first approach, localized funding mechanisms for retrofit projects, and centering equity in incentive models. In the transport sector, justice-oriented policy looks like ensuring safety of active travelers through infrastructural improvements, as well as expanding access to affordable public transport and shared mobility hubs to further reduce car reliance. All these findings are being synthesized into an evidence report, which will be available later this year. This report will directly support the preparation of the LDP3, ensuring that themes of resilience and adaptive capacity are embedded within the policy. And while the output of this research will be generated with the intention of supporting the production of policy, it will ultimately be the responsibility of South Lanarkshire Council to institute these changes, repeating the processes necessary to monitor and improve outcomes for your residents. However, for these findings to be truly effective, it is imperative that knowledge of just transition as a concept is disseminated across all levels of the council, not only within environmental or planning departments, but across housing, energy, and transport domains. Understanding what a just transition means and how it applies within each department will ensure that policies and decisions align towards a shared goal of achieving a fair and sustainable transition by 2045. In conclusion, this research underscores that vulnerability in South Lanarkshire is both social and physical, deeply rooted in existing inequalities. Addressing it requires integrated action guided by principles of justice and inclusion. Through collaboration between academics, communities, and the council, we can ensure that the transition to net zero is truly just. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. And if you would like to support my research further, please consider taking the survey I developed alongside the council based on the findings that we discussed here today. The survey runs until the end of February and is available to any resident of South Lanarkshire who wants to participate. If you have any questions about participating, feel free to send me an email. I also have links here if you would like to approach me afterwards. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? I see quite a few people. First of all, Councillor Bert Thompson.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very, very current. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep. Very, very current. I've said this before and I'll say it again. We all need to do our part, and some of us are, but unfortunately a lot of people are not. And I'm thinking, how can we wake people up? What more can we do to get this across how important it is to internationally other countries? And also, when it comes to ourselves, infrastructure, what more can we do to get the infrastructure in place, all our new developments, so that people don't need to travel too far? I was in Denmark last year, and one of the big things is about the habitat and about the ecosystem. And they were building a big lake there, and they says, well, at night people can go home, they sit here, feed the wildlife, and relax. It's all about people, all about the environment. There seems to be a different attitude, and although ours is improving, would you agree that we've still got a long, long way to go? And have you any ideas how we could encourage this? Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Adam Wallace.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I totally agree. There's lots more that we can do, and certainly are working towards delivering a lot of the work that Sage has outlined in the report there. I think I'll take the international aspect first. I think that's a really important one, and it's actually one of the key threads in the new climate change plan that the Scottish Government's prepared. How do we look at not only improving how we act on climate change locally, but we have an international responsibility as well, and how can we not only learn from other countries like Denmark that you mentioned, how they're doing things really well, but how can we also share what we do really well in Scotland and in South Lanarkshire with partners across the UK, Europe and further afield. So that's a key element running through the climate change plan. You might have seen it in the draft version that we sent round, but when we get the full and final climate change plan through, we'll absolutely circulate that as well, and you can see in there how we're working on that. In terms of a more South Lanarkshire focused approach and what we're doing, I think the findings that Sage is working on, and we've looked at some of the preliminary findings and some of the kind of preliminary recommendations as well, and we're trying to look at what is achievable. Reach for the stars, obviously, but what can we practically and feasibly and financially afford to do in South Lanarkshire to make make good on these recommendations and deliver some of the work that Sage mentioned. And I think that's going to be a key part of it, is in the evidence report that was mentioned and the work that's going to come out on the back of the research that Sage is carrying out, is how do we actually implement some of this. So that's going to be a key focus of what we're doing, is actually delivering on some of the recommendations. Do you have anything to add, Sage? Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add a bit to what you said, Adam, I think a key aspect, in addition to the structural change that will have to happen within the council, is also complemented by a cultural change that is far more difficult to influence on a local level. But the best I could advise from that perspective, especially based on the international perspective that was brought up in the question, is to observe these other places that have been doing so well in their transition to net zero, and find ways that we can learn from that and implement that in Scotland. And by leading from the front in this way, it will hopefully influence the cultural barriers to the transition as well. But we can't only rely on individuals to facilitate this transition. It needs to be community-led, but also championed by the council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Julia Mars.
Thank you, Chair. And you've covered both Adam and Sage some of what I would speak to. Thank you for the report. I think it's really interesting. Picking up the locality difference that I think you're already detecting. The fact that the just transition across South Lanarkshire won't look exactly the same in every locality, and that barriers like fuel poverty are not necessarily just economic, but they can be rural as well in terms of the lack of choice of fuel type and building type across the localities. So I'm wondering that at this point, you know, how that data might be treated, because obviously this is a just transition for South Lanarkshire, and how that might be looked at across the localities and the differences that you might, you know, detect and speak to across those.
Well, I am absolutely framing my analysis through this perspective of rural versus less rural, so to speak. And I've noticed differences already in the ways that people are adapting and the ways that people have different adaptive capacities. So that is definitely something that is going to come up in the evidence report rather thoroughly. And I think it's a testament to why research like this is necessary for all councils, because this finding cannot be universalized. It can't be applied to any other council. This is bespoke research that's made just for South Lanarkshire Council to be able to properly understand the challenges faced in each of their localities and the communities within those localities. So having this hyper-specific local information will be tremendously helpful, not only for the research that I'm doing, but will hopefully be applicable for any future research that the council chooses to do as they, as I mentioned before, continue to carry on this research and adjust as needed to create positive outcomes for your constituents.
Adam Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, just to add on that, like the kind of findings that we're pulling out already, like Sage said, are very kind of localised and specific, and already we're having conversations with colleagues in transport and planning, like Sage mentioned, in other parts of the council to look at how these findings are already influencing how we are shaping policy. It's not a one-size-fits-all model across South Lanarkshire, and the research is certainly contributing to that approach as well.
Okay, next question is Councillor Ralph Barker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sage, for that report. You put a lot into a very short time, as you did last year. So can only make the comments that you seem to have picked out the important matters. Victorian drainage, and I mean, the council is spending quite a lot of money trying to trace and improve Victorian drainage, which is now not coping. People don't realise that, but we're putting quite a lot into that. Into our housing, we get the unintended consequences that these houses weren't really designed to be hermetically sealed, which is the way that modern heating has to go to reduce emissions. And the big issue of transport as well. Even 25 years ago, there was a big move that we're going to reduce road transport, but always see it as it being more and more road transport, and then having to build more roads, either to cope with it or to encourage even more road transport. Well, we can hardly afford to maintain the roads that we've got. I mean, it's difficult to pick. Council seems to be doing everything possible. Housing, we're restricted everywhere. Transport, we're restricted everywhere. One of the biggest gaps is the West Coast Main Line, which could do more for us, and council have done their very, very best to get more local use of it, and it seems to fall on deaf ears at government level. In general, the just transition really isn't happening, and come back to a particular local concern, but it must affect most of South Lanarkshire. My ward, one of the biggest industrial employers, unsubsidised, complains about the high cost of electricity compared to his overseas competitors. He says it's 4 times the cost of his competitors, which may be an exaggeration, but what do we do when he upsticks and moves to Eastern Europe? It really is an issue that I don't understand, and it's well beyond this council to do anything about it. But I do feel government policies are not looking at the detail and what's actually happening. Right, thanks, and thanks again for that report.
Okay, next question comes from Councillor Ross Gowland, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sage, for that report. I found it really interesting, just in terms of the challenges that we face in South Lanarkshire and the issues that we grapple with, I think, which is, especially in my ward in Clydesdale South, which is poor access, poverty, and also a lot of the cuts from central government that have a big impact on our ability to tackle these issues on a local level. And also, I think, just transition, which I think there's a lot of misinformation about just transition and what it is and what it isn't, how people understand that. But I think I look forward to picking up some of the issues with you, and also the survey. I think it'll be quite important, I think, going forward. Okay, thanks, Al.
Thanks. And Councillor Kirsten Robb, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks again for all your work, Sage. Really good, really interesting discussion from different members as well. I think what you've really highlighted is the importance when there is a limited budget, there's a limited budget for everything, that we pinpoint those actions which will make the most difference on equality whilst we're transitioning. So that's good you've got starting to get the recommendations out. I think in terms of the electricity price, we've talked about it before in the committee. I think it's in Westminster's gift to decouple the price of electricity and gas, which will address some of the issues that you raised there, Ralph. You talked about the survey, Ross. I think every member in the Climate Committee has been circulated the survey, so please do promote it as much as possible before the close. It's really important that we get rich data from all parts of South Lanarkshire on that as well. And finally, awareness is key, as you said at the end there. What could we circulate the slides to either all members or members of the committee as part of that awareness, and also how are we incorporating just transition into our training opportunities in the council for staff to be aware of we know there's climate change awareness, but is there the justice angle inside that training? Thank you.
Now, Councillor Katie Loudon, please. Yeah, is there an answer? Right, sorry. First of all, answer from Adam Wallace, please.
Just on the training side of things and how we're engaging with staff, we've got plans to have Sage come along to the Climate Change and Sustainability Officers Group. That is representation from all services across the council, I believe, as well as an invitation from the Strategic Environmental Assessment group to come along and again present the research there. So I think we really are trying to find every opportunity to raise the profile of Sage's research and make sure that officers across the council know what just transition is and how we can apply it to, different, all the work that we do across South Lanarkshire. And we will circulate the slides after committee as well.
Okay, and Councillor Katie Loudon now, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Oh, camera's on. Thank you very much, Chair. Just to add to what Councillor Robb is saying, which I agree with entirely on the back of Councillor Barker's comments. It is really a disgrace that in a country that is as energy rich as ours, like Scotland is, that so many people are still struggling to heat their homes and that businesses are having to make these really tough decisions. We produce 6 times more gas than we actually use in Scotland, and about 2/3 of our electricity demand just now is currently met from renewables. So it really makes no sense that we pay some of the highest bills in Europe. I think one of the latest statistics was that 43% of households are struggling to pay energy bills, which really is just indefensible when we've got this abundance of energy resources. And Councillor Barker's party, of course, had promised that before the last UK election that the new government would cut energy bills by £300. But since they've come into power, they've actually gone up 5 times, the last time being just last month. on average. I think the statistic is nearly that they're £200 higher for your average household. So the fact remains that the businesses and households are still facing these soaring energy bills, even with the change of the UK government. So I absolutely agree with Councillor Robb that we do need a change in legislation at Westminster to uncouple gas and electricity prices, which are affecting households and businesses, as we've just heard. And failing that, the powers need to be devolved to the Scottish Government so we can get on and sort out this mess. Thank you.
We have next Councillor Ross Gowland again, please.
Thanks. I was just coming back to what Adam was saying just about the, was there climate awareness training that was offered to members? Because I think we got offered it a couple of years ago, but I'm not sure whether it came forward again.
Adam Wallace, please.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think it was 2023 that the climate emergency or climate awareness training was offered to members. If there is, and that was Keep Scotland Beautiful, we paid for them to come in and do that work. So if there was enough interest or demand, we could maybe look at possibly getting another kind of round of training, either delivered internally by ourselves, or if there was an appetite for somebody else to come in, or if there was specific kind of the Keep Scotland Beautiful training was maybe quite general. So if there was any interest in specific kind of topics or interests that people are interested in, then we could look at getting training set up for that if there was an appetite for it.
Okay, I had a question actually myself. So I was wondering if, to what extent the people that you've spoken to make the connection between things like flooding or heat and climate change. Do they sort of see that as being the cause of it, or are they looking at these problems just in themselves?
Thank you for that question, and I'm glad that you asked, because an interesting finding from my work with focus groups and interviews across South Lanarkshire with community organizations and locals is that most identified climate change impacts within their life but didn't make the connection between the flooding, for instance, and it being related to climate change. And I also found, interestingly, that a lot of community organizations that work indirectly with climate change will promote the co-benefits of action. So for example, community gardening, that has enormous benefits for the climate, where you're getting your food. But also it's more of a mental health benefit that people experience when they are participating in community activities like this, where they're around others and they're dealing with nature. So that's just one example that I've learned, where I've seen that even though people aren't necessarily recognizing the climate impacts in their life, they're still impacted by flooding and temperature change and all of these things. But even with that, I don't want to say lack of awareness, but lack of awareness of the connection between those two, these same people are still able to engage in climate action. It's just about how we frame it. So thank you for asking, and I think that's a very interesting point that's going to come through in the evidence report.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Councillor Equi now.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. It was very interesting. I just wanted to say that it was regards to the training. How do we make sure that the training does actually happen? Because I think that all members of council would actually benefit from that, seen as every single committee we sit on, basically it's one of the requirements that we think back to how we're affecting the environment. But I also think that it's something that we should definitely have for the members of this committee, because you don't go on licensing without learning about the licensing laws. When you do planning, it's just you've got to do a session and learn about that. So I think that it's something that's really essential, so that people actually properly understand, even if it's bits of abbreviations about of certain, like, words and whatever else, that people won't actually get it or understand how it actually works. Not everybody's got, a science background. So how do we go about, Chair, to make sure that that is actually something that the people in this committee have to do, and also that is something we could offer out to the wider councillors, because I think that the whole community would benefit from that actually, like, taking place and it being mandatory.
Okay, Kevin Carr will give an answer to that.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Equi. Following a series of questions on training this morning, so it's clearly of interest for members. So Adam will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a Learn Online course for climate change that all members can undertake, and we would encourage you to do so. We'll perhaps, after committee today, we'll recirculate a link to that course. I think as we work through this process, because this is just the preliminary evidence report, and we're heading to a conclusion that's going to build into our local development plan process around a just transition, about pulling some of that down into what's actually deliverable across South Lanarkshire. We'll start to think about how we maybe integrate that into some training courses at the right time as well. So, as I said, we'll redistribute the link to the Learn Online courses, and we'll consider, through this process, if there's any additionality that we need to undertake as well.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Chair, for that. It was much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I just thank you for the presentation and for answering all the questions today, Sage, and I look forward, and I'm sure we all do, to seeing your future findings. Thanks very much. Okay, moving on to item number 4. Which is the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan 2025-2026 Quarter 2 Progress Report. And that is pages 13 to 94 of the pack. Could I ask Gemma Dodds to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the 2025-26 Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan Quarter 2 Progress Report, which covers the period 1st of April 2025 to the 30th of September 2025. I refer you to section 3 of the report, which provides background information relating to the 25-26 Action Plan. The Action Plan was approved at the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee in March 2025. Progress against actions is monitored using Improve and reported to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee at Quarter 2 and Quarter 4. Section 4 of the report provides an overview of the progress made against the Climate Change Action Plan during Quarter 2. Progress on all objectives, actions and measures is set out in full within Appendix 1. The Action Plan Progress Report comes in 2 parts. The first part contains performance measures towards the strategy's outcomes, and the second part contains improvement actions for each of the themes within the strategy. The overall summary of performance measures at the end of Quarter 2 is as follows. There are 18 performance measures, of which 8 are green, indicating the timescale has been met, 1 is amber, indicating minor slippage, 0 are red, 5 are to be reported at Quarter 4, and 4 are contextual. The amber categorisation relates to the percentage of total household waste that is recycled, which has to date fallen short of the target, but is continuing to be monitored. The overall summary of improvement actions at the end of Quarter 2 is as follows. There are 96 improvement actions, of which 6 are marked as complete, 80 are green, there are 8 amber actions where minor slippage was reported. 7 of these categorisations relate to the revision of timescales for the delivery of associated plans, guides and strategies. One of the amber categorisations relates to the withdrawal of the Nature Restoration Fund by the Scottish Government, which will in turn impact the scale and pace of biodiversity-related work. Further information about all amber actions is included at Appendix 1, and there are no red measures. Notable achievements during Quarter 2 include the successful launch of the composter pilot scheme in August 2025, which was delivered by Waste Services with support from Digital and PR. The service procured, promoted and delivered 360 composters in the first phase, and the second phase was launched to coincide with Recycle Week and Climate Week in September 2025. The Council achieved a 5% reduction in carbon emissions in 2024-25 in comparison to 2023 and 24. And 3 projects delivered external wall insulation to properties in Forth, Larkhall and Hamilton, with cavity wall insulation also delivered in 55 properties in Forth, and work is ongoing at 60 properties in Hamilton. Sections 5 through to 9 cover all the standard implications for the Council. Section 7 provides some detail on the specific climate change, sustainability and environmental implications of the Strategy and Action Plan, namely how it enables us to meet our legislative duties and to contribute to national and international targets. So I refer you back to Section 2 of the paper and ask that the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan Q2 Progress Report for 25-26 be noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments on that report? I see Councillor Julia Marsbeard.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, so maybe if I bring maybe 3 of them, and then there's another couple, just to break it up slightly.
Okay, yeah.
So the first question I have is on page 30 of the report, and I very much welcome the funding to the for the heat network. Heat networks, especially the one where there's £50,000 for the detailed feasibility study for district heating of Armada Street, and inclusion of 3 more sites, obviously, as part of the recent probable outturn amendment. I'm wondering whether you could advise whether these feasibility studies will include additional wind and solar opportunities as a possible fuel source, and the scope of the study beyond the council-run buildings, or the inclusion in residential housing. I'm also wondering whether the report that I understand is due to be completed in March this year could be brought to this committee for consideration. I'll move on to the next 2 and then allow people to respond.
Yes.
Page 32, I'm noting the percentage of household waste that is recycled is 41.3%, which is sitting at amber because we haven't reached that target. So this figure is impacted apparently by the garden permit scheme and the bulky waste recycling streams being interrupted. I'm wondering how much of that impact is coming from each of those issues, and how does that equate in terms of the tonnage of waste to the council, and what's the impact on council revenue to support the non-recyclable route. And on page 34, this is good news. I'm noting the air quality management areas in the Whirleys, East Kilbride, and also in Cambuslang and in East Kilbride, and also in Rutherglen, and that to be having that conversation where those schemes have been revoked, which can sound like a negative thing, but it's a really good thing that the work done to this point has led to those schemes no longer actually being in place. And I'd just like to welcome that's the case, and that there isn't the problems that there used to be in that area.
Okay, we'll get answers for those questions and come back to you for your other questions. Steve Dunner, please.
I can give you some background regarding the Hamilton district heating feasibility within there. We're looking at a number of options, or the consultant is looking at a number of options in there, one being a ground source, one being an air source solution, and a third one being potentially a wastewater solution to fuel effectively the heat decarbonisation. So the first part of that feasibility would actually be to carry out what they call a techno-economic model based on those 3 solutions. And as part of that, they will then report on what would be the most feasible option to take to the next stage. The next stage would be an outline business case. So, there's a number of factors, that are within there, but regarding your question regarding wind and solar, it's maybe a little on the early side to include some of those measures in place. However, there has been consideration that whatever electrified solution, is put forward in there, any contributor to actually reduce the amount of grid electricity being used in there would be beneficial. Again, there's maybe some challenges around maybe wind in the centre, you know, of Hamilton, but certainly solar, you know, maybe, you know, some sort of scenario to at least contribute to some of that grid network. But the first part of the feasibility is actually about looking at technologies that could be applied to help electrify the heat sources at this moment.
That sounds really, really hopeful and really interesting. Is it possible that further detail to that report after March can be brought to this committee?
Sorry, I couldn't see the light there from where I was looking. I don't see why not. I don't have any.
Kevin Carr, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mars. We'll have a look at the reporting process for the feasibility study, but I don't see why we wouldn't be able to bring it here, but we'll just check which order we'll need to report it. I would imagine it maybe need to go to Exec Committee first, but I'm no issue with bringing it here.
Good, thank you.
And Councillor Mars, other questions? Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. I'll pick up your questions on waste and recycling, Councillor Mars. So, on your first point about the bulky waste contract, so as we say in the report, we had some disruption towards the end of the contract where the contractor went into liquidation. So we had a 6 weeks period where we had no alternative but for the bulky collections to be going to a landfill. Thankfully, it came at the end of the contractual process, so we're kind of fortunate in that way, and we've got a new contractor, so we're now using that new contractor in the central belt where we're recycling and that, as much of that as possible. On your second point about the garden waste permit scheme, so we brought an update on the scheme to the Community and Enterprise Committee in October, just given the first 6 months of the scheme. We demonstrated the income and the tonnages. As part of the modelling for that new way of working, we included an element of tonnages that would move, we would expect to move from the general waste to the garden waste bin. And the first 6 months of that scheme we were actually within the model, so it was less than anticipated, but you're right, there is some tonnages that's moved to general waste. And in terms of that whole financial model, we're actually better off because it's less than we modelled initially. But you're right to raise the point, there has been some shift.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Mars, you had more questions?
Yes, I did. The page 37 of the report, I'm pleased to see the promotion of energy advice and funding support schemes for households, and I'm also noting the central role that we have with food banks and citizens advice bureaus in terms of supporting those in fuel poverty with energy vouchers. I'm wondering whether information on energy improvements and funding could be offered via those links with energy vouchers. Also, you know, particularly the one-stop shop that's noted in page 90 of this pack, and you know, organisations like Money Matters, which is a council organisation, and I wonder whether people could be directed to that to offer a more long-term and sustainable advice, so that out of fuel poverty rather than the initial advice, help that the voucher is able to offer. Also on page 51 and 53, I very much welcome the adult learning opportunities which raise awareness on climate change and food growing, and I note that they're all in our universal connections and schools, which is excellent work, but I wonder whether that could be extended to sheltered housing complexes with a view to improving their outside space, but also with their aspirations towards food growing and sustainable living. Thank you.
Kevin Carr, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mars. So, picking up your questions in turn, we're happy to pick up with the relevant service with the signposting of the appropriate supports through whether it's the food poverty schemes or the fuel poverty schemes. So we'll pick that up to make sure that it's aligned and that they're getting support and advice for longer term solutions as well. And your second point in terms of the food growing, again, happy to pick up with the service, the landscape design service who kind of deliver that for the council. I know in the past they've tried to work with our housing colleagues in getting some of these schemes off the ground, but we're happy to pick that up again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any further questions, Kat?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Ross Clark, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the report on this item and the answers to questions that have already been asked. I'm looking at page 67 in relation to the resilience of the road network. Of course, is something which needs to happen, especially as I think that's become more important over recent years. But I'm looking specifically under the comments and progress section at the bottom, talking about the trials of low carbon road surfacing materials. I think that is, really positive and actually quite interesting as well. I'm wondering if we have any more kind of information on that at this stage, if we should expect to receive a report on that at a future meeting of this committee, because I think it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see not only how effective it is in terms of the roads resurfacing aspect, but also, more importantly, in relation to our work here, the climate impact of that. And I think more generally, this kind of routine maintenance and resurfacing is becoming more difficult. It relates to a future item on this agenda about weather conditions. Winters are becoming wetter and so on, so that will make, I suppose, that maintenance more difficult, more necessary. So the use of new technology and trials of new methods is, I think, something that's good to see, but it'll be good to see the results of these.
Colin Pack, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Clark. It's clear that the climate is impacting on the road network. As I'm sure we've all driven it recently and can see that, in particular this time of year. There's also lots of products out there, kind of promising the world that there's a new technique, it's carbon friendly. So colleagues in North Lanarkshire are doing a lot just now via a kind of a research programme they're doing. We're doing a lot ourselves. Probably not enough that you guys know about, but we're maybe not sharing as much with you as we probably could. One of the issues we have is to test a product like this, you need to test its long life. So we've been doing it for the last 2 or 3 years. We've been looking at thin surfacing treatments. Some have been successful, some haven't. For those of you in the kind of rural area, you'll be aware of our surface dressing programme, where we extend the life of the road, which is much, albeit it's a technique, but it's an established technique. It's much more carbon friendly than doing a traditional road resurfacing repair. This particular year, we have, say this financial year, through the Climate Emergency Fund, we've trialled 3 sites, which I can give you further details of, and you can assess it for us as well. So we've used a biogenic binder, which is a byproduct from the paper industry. You can interpret that different ways, but it's a product, it's a plant-based product that we're using as opposed to a traditional oil-based product in there as well. So that only went down towards the end of last calendar year. So as I was saying, in terms of the actual, has it been successful or not, I'd like to get through a winter, possibly 2 winters, and we'll see. So certainly we can bring something back to this committee. I don't think we're in a position to do it over the next 12 months for the reasons I've set out. And perhaps we do take a paper to community and enterprise on the roads asset management plan, and there's a climate change section in there, which to a certain extent probably is not as detailed as it could be, but for this year, which will probably be around about August, September, we'll maybe try and expand in that paper a little bit more, capture some of the points I've talked about here. But in terms of actual success or otherwise, it's possibly a little bit premature in that front. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirsten Robb, please.
Thanks again, and thanks to the whole officer team across the council for making progress on this. It's important to keep the momentum going as well, because the scale of action needed is massive, and that's across the whole world really, because the scale of the climate and nature crisis is massive as well. So I wanted to ask a few questions, possibly 4 in total, hopefully not too bad to answer. Page 14 is the first one on the Nature Restoration Fund. I do believe it hasn't been withdrawn, but we've yet to hear an allocation for the council on that, but maybe Kevin knows some more in due course. But if money is reducing, we do need to emphasise that it's about doing things differently. It's not always about extra money, it's about doing things differently as well. So how we manage our grasses, continuing the journey on herbicide reduction for biodiversity as well as human health. looking at the front line first, how can we make sure it's biodiversity is integrated in that as well? So it was just really a question, have you heard anything more about the Nature Restoration Fund council allocation, and could we hear more about it once you've decided what projects we're going to move forward with whatever allocation we get? I've got another few, so do you want them one at a time?
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Councillor Rob. Unfortunately, I haven't heard any more about the allocation. There's a bit of confusion, I think it would be fair to say, across government and local councils on what's actually coming to councils as opposed to national bodies. So can't confirm that at the moment, but hopefully we will in due course. Just to pick up on some of your other points about doing things differently. So this is the third year of frontline first funding. And when that came in 3 years ago, one of the things that we did was invest in a lot of new equipment for mechanical weed removal, and that's allowed us to reduce our glyphosate usage by around 30%. So we've continued to do that over the last 3 years, and we've been using our own budget now to bring in some additionality around that. So we'll continue to do that as much as possible, using budget as it becomes available, but also trying to make sure that that's integrated into business as normal now for the local teams.
Councillor Rob.
Thanks very much. Give Kevin a wee break. Colin, could I ask, looking at on page 27, the data for 2024 showed a decrease of people travelling actively by public transport, while the Scottish trend is increasing. Have you done any analysis to why that might be, and what specific actions could we take forward to reverse this trend in the forthcoming local transport plan? Thanks.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Rob. In terms of the analysis, well, we're obviously aware it's a challenge. You know, we're seeing very, very modest changes in that over the years. In terms of actions, we're just going to continue to do much what we're doing, but hopefully doing it better. The local transport strategy will set out a kind of series of themes and actions and visions for us to continue to encourage active travel. We have, as you've heard me saying before, we have a suite of active travel studies and plans across all our towns and villages now. We have taken forward a range of initiatives in that front, big focus in East Kilbride because it's easier to do, if I'm being honest. But we do have other plans elsewhere, so we'll continue to do that. We're obviously again encouraging active travel, sustainable travel. We're doing a lot of work. We just completed work in here Myers in East Kilbride. We're on site as we speak up at Lanark as well, trying to encourage greater integration between modes. So all of that needs funding. It needs sustained funding over a longer term. So having a refreshed, current, up-to-date local transport strategy which complement some of the work that Sage was talking about doing. No doubt some of the kind of information that Sage has been given us has fed its way into that along with the local development plan, will set a good kind of 10-year plan ahead of us. So very much the same initiatives and projects, but hopefully complemented with additional funding that allows us to make a real difference. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yep, another two short ones. Just coming back to page 32 on the waste side of things, do we have any recent data? I think that the data in there is up to June. How the recycling rate's looking now, and what further action is proposed to address that recycling rate and try and bring it up? And could we hear about that, whether it's at community enterprise or this committee?
Kevin Carr, please.
Thanks, Councillor Rob. We will have the data up to December, but I don't have it to hand, so I can't confirm whether that's improved or stayed the same. As you'll be aware, we got approval at Exec Committee towards the end of last year for investment in a new waste strategy team that's going to be focusing on improving and increasing our waste awareness and engagement activities that we do across the council area. So just last week, that full team's in post now. I met with them. They are now being charged with coming up with an action plan to tackle some of that. So some of the things I've already started looking at is food waste presentation rates. So they'll be initiating a project around that. We'll be looking at some of our flatted complexes as well, where we've got real challenges around recycling capacities and contamination. So they'll start to focus on a whole host of projects, hopefully to encourage behaviour change and make sure that local residents are using all of the bin infrastructure appropriately. So as we work through that process, absolutely we'll be bringing reports to this committee on success or not some of these projects.
Further questions?
Just
Yes.
one quick last one. That's great, Kevin. Sorry. That's great and really exciting to hear what comes out of their action plan. Look forward to that. Final one is just a wee update, page 55. I feel like I've asked this a few times. The employee travel plan has been under review for quite a few years, probably since I started. When will it be published, please? Thank you.
Colin?
No, it's not myself. The other one, Adam.
Was it Adam? Colin? Adam Wallace, please.
Thanks for the question. My understanding is that the draft travel plan is prepared at the moment and under review. We're hoping to have that. I think we were hoping to have it by the end of last year, but we're still waiting on it. Once that draft's been reviewed, I think the intention is that that will be brought to this committee. So I guess the main thing is that it is in development and we're expecting it very soon.
Thank you. That's me. Thanks very much.
Okay, I don't see any further questions, so can we agree the recommendation, please?
Agreed.
Okay, moving on to item 5, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy 5-Year Action Plan Midpoint Review. That's on pages 95 to 102. Can I ask Adam Wallace to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update committee on progress made against the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy 5-Year Action Plan. The Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy 2022 to 2027 was approved by South Lanarkshire Council on the 15th of June 2022 and sets out the Council's approach to developing sustainably and tackling the climate emergency over a 5-year period. Its focus is to deliver a coordinated, ambitious response to the climate emergency by embedding sustainability across all council activities. To support delivery of the strategy, an associated overarching 5-year action plan was developed alongside more detailed annual action plans. A copy of the 5-year action plan is embedded at section 3.2. The plan set out clear priorities and actions to improve health and wellbeing, promote climate justice, empower communities, protect and restore the natural environment and drive economic transformation, highlighting achievements, challenges and next steps across the Council's 13 strategic priorities. The most recent annual action plan for 2025-2026 was approved by this committee in March 2025, and this was the third such annual action plan under the 5-year plan. This report is not intended as a forensic analysis of the progress of the 5-year action plan. The biannual updates to this committee on the annual action plans provide that level of granular detail and should be referred to for further information. This report has been prepared to provide a high-level overview of the progress made against the priority actions of the 5-year plan and to identify areas for further attention in forthcoming annual action plans in 26-27 and 27-28. Section 4 provides an overview of the progress made against each of the 13 strategic priorities, including information on delivery of associated actions and steps for each priority. The progress updates also include an indication of the status of each action. The table at 4.1 highlights that the vast majority of the actions within the 5-year action plan are on track. 8 actions are amber, indicating minor slippage in these areas. A number of these actions have been impacted by slipping national timelines, for example for the implementation of the Deposit Return Scheme and Heat and Buildings Bill, while others have been delayed in anticipation of forthcoming national guidance, for example with regards to the National Good Food Nation Plan. The forthcoming annual action plans for 26-27 and 27-28 will prioritise ongoing actions and actions rated amber in the table. The key work areas which have been identified for inclusion in future annual action plans are noted at 5.2, and these include continued action to reduce the Council's carbon emissions, implementation of the Council's LHEs, implementation of the Sustainable sustainability impact assessment process and sustainable procurement process, implementation of the Good Food Nation Plan, preparation for the forthcoming Heat and Buildings Bill, adaptation to the impacts of climate change, strengthening our collaboration with Lanarkshire Climate Action Hub, continuing waste reduction efforts, developing the understanding of the Council's built and natural historic assets, continued tree planting, efforts to increase biodiversity and peatlands restoration, and workforce upskilling opportunities. The implications of this report are noted between sections 6 to 10. And then just to refer back to the recommendations at section 2, the committee are asked to approve the following recommendations: that the progress made against the 5-year action plan is noted, and to approve the ongoing actions and next steps as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Ralph Barker, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Adam, for that report. Just one or two comments about the electric vehicle fleet in here. And all I ask is that we do keep updated on the practicality and the costs of the electric vehicle fleet. I mean, I know the big conversion came at a bad time with respect to COVID, which affected a lot of transport at the time. But there just seem to be one or two comments in there that are realistic about the cost, just to keep us up to date on that. Thanks very much.
Colin, please. Colin Clark.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Barker. There's you'll maybe see reference in here, reference to the fleet strategy, which will be coming forward. It's not moved as quickly as I would have liked, but throughout the course of 2026, there'll be discussions on that coming via committee of some sort, probably community and enterprise. We have made good progress in terms of conversion of our cars and small vans, but as the report notes, there's challenges with the heavier fleet as well, and we're also seeing some issues beginning to emerge with the type of vehicles and the range, etc., and the type of the kind of nature of South Lanarkshire as well. So we are looking at our options there about whether we are going to have full conversions or maybe have a percentage of our vehicles hybrid, just to kind of cater for those more kind of challenging kind of weather periods and kind of rural nature of South Lanarkshire as well. But in terms of a conversation on it, we can continue that through the development of the local of the fleet strategy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Ross Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. This question, unless they wish to respond in any operational aspects, this question isn't directed towards officers, but rather yourself as Chair, or indeed the food champion. I see on page 97, next to the action food security, the status of that is amber. Can I ask what action the food champion has undertaken over the past year or is scheduled to take over the next year to ensure that action goes green? Of course, this is a position which your administration deemed necessary.
Thank you. Do we have Adam Wallace, please?
Hey, thanks for the question, Councillor Clark. Just on this one, I guess in terms of the work that the council's got planned around food security, you'll notice in the report one of the kind of barriers or stumbling blocks to progressing this was around the waiting for the Good Food Nation plan for the Scottish Government. That was released only last year, so we're still kind of getting up to speed with what is actually entailed within that plan, what the actions and the objectives for local authorities are within that. Our team are working with colleagues in community plan, community engagement to take that forward and see what's feasible, but it's certainly going to be featuring in the 26-27 action plan around the work that we're going to be moving forward to turn that action green. But it's, yeah, I guess recognising that it's been an area that we've kind of been holding back until we get national guidance on. Now we've got that national guidance, we'll be able to deliver at pace on that.
Okay. Councillor Moore-Razak, please.
Thank you. Firstly, apologies for the lateness. Had a big issue with the laptop, so that's why I came in. It's page 100, the deposit return scheme. I noticed there's pilots going on in the high schools, but I'm surprised there's no pilot going on in the county buildings itself because of the number of employees that are working in it. This is kicking in October 2027, so it's not that far away. And I'm a bit concerned at the fact also that I've not had anything come through about our bins, our public bins. The fact that in Ireland, for instance, there's a higher instances of littering because people are going into the bins to take out the containers, the people that are homeless, for instance. So that is causing more littering than anything else. And the simpler solution would have been what some of the Scandinavian countries have done, is put baskets on top of the bins and just put the containers on top of the baskets, and that would alleviate that problem. But again, there's been nothing discussed about this as far as I'm concerned.
Kevin Carr, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Razak. So it's not that nothing's been discussed. The team are still considering the actual requirements of the scheme. Obviously, glass is now looking to be excluded in Scotland, but it also looks like schools might be exempt from that as well in terms of how the process is going to work. But absolutely, if there's learning from other countries who have had the scheme in place for a number of years, we'll certainly be looking at that as well. It is one of the concerns that we have also, is that kind of process where people might be looking for plastics in our waste stream. So it's something that we're going to have to think about as the scheme gets closer.
Okay. If I could come back.
Yeah.
The thing about schools being exempt might be a bad idea, because you can apply for an exemption for the deposit return scheme anyway through businesses as well. But the thing is that if you've got schools with a population coming through at 1,300 people, that's secondary schools, then you could have possibly 1,400 containers. And if you have a deposit return machine that is there, reverse vending machine, then that could take the littering down by a substantial amount. And if you have some form, that would help the school as well with their funding as well. So it's a win-win situation for having that. But so I would personally ask that you have a look at that again, because I think that if you look at the foreign countries and abroad, they've put it to full use, and it's been a bit more profitable for the schools.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Councillor Razak. So as you're aware, and you alluded to earlier, with a pilot in St Andrews and St Bride's with a reverse vending machine, 18 months ago, I think it was. And whilst it was successful, it was pretty resource intensive to make sure that the pilot was working properly, both from school staff and from facility staff. But again, something that we'll be looking at as the scheme comes closer.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lindsay Hamilton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, 4.2 obviously says that there was a number of the actions have been impacted by slipping national timelines. I was wondering how confident we were that the timelines would turn, that the actions would turn green within the 5-year plan.
Okay, Adam Wallace, please.
Thank you for the question. I'll maybe take the ones that are mentioned there in turn. So like I said, the Good Food Nation plan came out at the end, towards the end of last year, I believe. So that one we're pretty confident that we'll be able to move at pace on delivering. I might ask my colleague to correct me if I'm wrong here, but in terms of the Heat and Buildings Bill, we're expecting that, depending on the outcome of the next Scottish election, that might be progressed by the end of this calendar year, the Heat and Buildings Bill. Is that right? Yeah. And then with the deposit return scheme, like Kevin said, again, we're waiting on guidance at a national level on that one. So while we're confident that when we have the national guidance in place, we'll be able to move at pace, like you mentioned, there are instances where we might be impacted by delays at a national level.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further questions. So can we agree the recommendations on that report, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 6 is response to the Council's climate emergency declaration. That's on pages 103 to 108. Could I ask Adam Wallace again to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to detail the steps to be undertaken by officers in response to the climate emergency declaration motion of the 1st of October 2025. On the 1st of October 2025, South Lanarkshire Council passed a motion declaring a climate emergency, referencing the serious and immediate threat of climate change and the need to accelerate the pace of delivering action. The motion also noted that the impacts of climate-induced severe weather are being increasingly felt locally on citizens, services, infrastructure and budgets. To respond to the motion and the agreed actions within it, the Council will need to progress a number of key work areas over the remainder of this term. The table at Appendix 1 details the actions as per the motion and the proposed next steps to be undertaken by the Council in order to deliver them. I'll briefly run through the appendix with you now. So the first action in Appendix 1 asks that we reaffirm the need to set targets and detail how we will align spend. To progress that, the Council are developing a net zero route map, which we presented the intention to deliver at this committee last year. We hope that, the timeline for that is for that to be complete by March 2027. That report will include detail on clear and achievable Council emission reduction targets around our Scope 1 emissions, as well as coordinated action and spend aligned to achieving those targets. The motion also asked for a number of reports to be submitted. So the first of those reports was around the increasing impact of climate-induced severe weather. In terms of next steps, we have a series of reports that will be presented to this committee in relation to the progress and outcomes of the Strategic Climate Change Risk and Opportunity Assessment, with an update scheduled for this committee in June, and then the final report scheduled provisionally for February 2027. Second of those reports is on action that will be taken to reduce the impact of council events and catering. We propose to bring a paper to this committee in June 2026 detailing how we will take that forward. The next report was on how the next iteration of the climate change and sustainability strategy can have input from local communities. We will bring a report to this committee outlining their approach to development of the new climate change and sustainable development strategy, including the aspects mentioned within the motion relating to community engagement, and that is scheduled for September 2026. And the final request for a paper is on page 108, and that is for a report to Executive Committee or Community and Enterprise Resource Committee, providing an update on active travel investment, and that report is scheduled to be presented to Community and Enterprise Committee in March 2026. There's also just a couple of actions within the motion. The first one was encouraging elected members to connect with Lanarkshire Climate Action Hub. We propose to send out an email after this committee linking elected members with the hub, encouraging them to get involved. The other action was around endorsing continued calls for fair funding for local government. That action was complete and was endorsed by the Council on the 1st of October with the motion. And then the final action was around writing to the Scottish Government to request full devolution of all active travel investment. That letter was sent to the Director of Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government in December 2025, so that action is also complete. So just to return back to section 5 of the report in terms of employee implications, all of the actions detailed under the next steps align well with existing work programmes for the Council and do not require significant employee resources. It should be noted that one of the actions within the motion, the report on action that will be taken to reduce the impact of council events and catering, that may require some input from several service areas and take quite a bit of work. But other than that, the other implications are noted between 6 and 9. And then just to refer back to the recommendation is that the steps proposed in Appendix 1 to respond to the Council's climate emergency declaration be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments? Councillor Ross Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to Adam for the report. This was, of course, a motion from Councillor Robb, the Deputy Chair, which I seconded in October last year. So it is very good to see this coming to the committee, detailing the actions, what's been taken, and very importantly, what the next steps are. So it's very welcome to see. I think there's obviously areas, and I think we all recognise this, where we could be more ambitious than we currently are. Obviously, there are always going to be funding restraints no matter who you are, but it's always important we always look to see what more we can do, and that's what kind of this motion was about. So it's good to see this coming forward. And I think it would also be good to see how the bit around community engagement pans out, because I think that is very important. I know it's detailed slightly in this paper. I think going forward that would be something that would be really good to see extensive work done on. Obviously there's the Lanarkshire Climate Action Hub, but there's also lots of other good community organisations which are sort of linked to that climate aspect. In terms of, if I'm being cheeky, in terms of my own ward, you've got the likes of the Larkhall Community Growers, obviously linked to that food growing aspect of climate change and biodiversity. So I think that community engagement will be really good to see how that pans out, and I would stress the importance of it.
Okay, thank you. Adam Wallace, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Clark. Yeah, absolutely. Very keen on ensuring that community engagement is front and centre when we're developing the new strategy. We've got the Lanarkshire Climate Hub, like you mentioned, so we're going to be working with them a lot closer over the next couple of years. I think they've just received their funding from the Scottish Government to deliver for another year, so it's really good to see that. In terms of the kind of suggestion that you made around how we're engaging with other groups, I think that's a really good one. We've been speaking to colleagues in North Lanarkshire actually who have just undertaken a revision of their climate change plan, and they've approached a kind of community panel model and how they've done that, and working with a number of different groups. So we've been speaking to them quite closely, seeing how it's, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, and I think we'll look at how we can possibly adapt a similar model to South Lanarkshire. If we think that it's worthwhile doing. But yeah, certainly wanting to make sure that we engage with as many community groups and areas of South Lanarkshire as possible when we're developing the new strategy.
Okay, Councillor Graham Scott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
About some technical problems, thank you. First of all, thank you, Adam, for his report. I'd like to point members to 5.1, the last sentence, and I'll read it. It should be noted that one of the actions within the motion, report on action that will be taken to reduce the impact of council events and catering, may require input from several service areas. I've got a concern with this, and I know some of the charities and voluntary organisations inside South Lanarkshire that have contacted me have concerns about this. That an unintended consequence of the motion on October the 1st was that we don't do fundraising for voluntary organisations and charities that operate within South Lanarkshire. I know we have an enviable record of doing fundraising dinners, burn suppers for, and I'll apologise if I've missed any organisations, Guide Dogs for the Blind, Kilbride Hospice. I know we have a fabulous relationship with Maggie's, a cancer charity, and the charitable sector is struggling at the moment, and these fundraising events organised by the council can add huge amounts of money to them that can help them. And I know that they are worried that what is said in the October the 1st resolution or motion and the unintended consequences that the council may, there's a prohibition on us doing events like this for charitable, because there wasn't a burn supper this year. There have been previous burn suppers for charities within South Lanarkshire, but one wasn't organised. And I know we have a magnificent provost and deputy provost in Margaret and Bert that host these events excellently. Just can I have a reaction to that, please?
Okay, I'll ask my Vice Chair, who proposed the motion, to give a response to that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Graham. A valid question, absolutely. That's why we accepted the amendment from David Watson at the time to say catering should be in person where appropriate, or on online default, but in person where appropriate, to make sure we cover those important events. So it should be okay, Graham, and we've accounted for that in the amendment I accepted at the time.
And can I come back in, Chair, just on a supplementary to that?
Yes.
And can that be enshrined in the report that Adam's spoken about to bring back, and I think it's June that Adam mentioned, about the catering aspect of it? Can that be enshrined, what Kirsten's just said, in that report?
Kevin Carr, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Scott. So I think that's the intention of the report. You know, my reading of that motion and amendment was about how we make these events more sustainable rather than how we stop doing them in the first place. So it'll have a focus on sustainability, and we'll make sure we cover that in the report that Adam will bring forward.
Okay. Councillor Kirsten Robb, please.
Thank you. Just to sum up as well. So, yep, thanks very much, officers, for your report on this, and for all councillors indeed who supported the motion. It's important to get the cross-party support for these things. The key point of the motion was to recognise the climate emergency and treat it like an emergency. We've had too many plans at international, national and even local level where it hasn't been treated like an emergency. So when we produce a plan, it's important that there's the resources, targets, plan. You'll see from page 20 of today's papers that we haven't had targets on emissions reductions. Whilst we have achieved some, it's important, if it is an emergency, that we treat it like that, and that comes through plans, resourcing and targets as well. So thank you very much, everyone, and I look forward to working with you as we move forward in this area.
Okay. Can we agree the recommendation, please?
Agreed.
Okay. Moving on to item number 7, the Scottish Government consultation on the Climate Change Plan 2026 to 2040. That's on page 109 to 132. Can I invite Catherine McCafferty to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an overview of the Scottish Government's draft climate change plan, and to update the committee on South Lanarkshire Council's response to the climate change plan consultation. The Scottish Government published a draft climate change plan for 2026 to 2040 for consultation on the 6th of November 2025. Section 4 of the report provides a summary of the draft climate change plan. The CPP contains over 150 policies and proposals to decarbonise Scotland's economy and align with net zero by 2045. The plan outlines the emissions pathways for 7 key sectors, the key actions required, and the economic opportunities and benefits these actions will support. The 7 key sectors covered in the plan are buildings, both residential and public, transport, waste, energy supply, business and industrial processes, agriculture, and land use change and forestry. The CPP consultation opened on the 6th of November 2025. The consultation on the draft plan was split into 6 sections, seeking feedback and suggestions on delivering a just transition, sectorial contributions, policies and proposals, impact assessments, strategic environmental impact assessments, monitoring emissions reductions, and monitoring just transition. So, due to the tight consultation timescales set by the Scottish Government, it was not possible to present the consultation response for approval at this committee meeting. As agreed at the Climate Change Committee on the 12th of November 2025, contact was made with the Scottish Government to establish whether a late submission would be acceptable to allow for committee approval. The Scottish Government advised that an extension would not be possible and that any late submission would be less able to influence the final plan. With this in mind, the draft CPP and consultation questions were circulated to members of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee for comment on the 17th of November 2025. The final response was also circulated on the 19th of December 2025 for comment prior to submission. The Council then submitted a response to the consultation in line with the 29th of January 2026 deadline, and a full response can be found in Appendix 1 of the report. So if I could take you back to Section 2 of the report, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the overview of the contents of the draft climate change plan be noted, and that the South Lanarkshire Council's response to the climate change plan, as provided at Appendix 1, be noted also. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, we had quite a bit of a discussion around the timetabling at the last meeting, and thank you to officers for all they did to try and get members access to have input onto it. Do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Julia Mars, please.
Thank you, Chair, and somewhat I would follow your remarks. Thank you for such a wide-ranging and comprehensive response, and for the work done to ensure that members were able to contribute and see the final draft within the timescales of the consultation. So my thanks to the officers for their work done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Kirsten Robb, please.
Just a brief one. Thanks very much, team. Just to reiterate the previous point, for a plan to work, it needs targets, detailed plans and resources. So I look forward to that sort of coming out of the plan as it moves forward, and for local authorities to see where they fit in on that. Also, whenever plans are implemented, things should be affordable, convenient, and also highlight the co-benefits of action, picking up on Sage's presentation earlier. And something I picked up when I was looking through it is that there's a lot of opportunities for the rural area to benefit from this, whether it's land regeneration, renewables, transport hubs and so on, and pop-up shops and everything to make rural living better whilst also contributing towards the climate action plan. So I think for South Lanarkshire, urban and rural, there's opportunities in there which we can hopefully seize. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So can we agree to note this report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Item 8 is urgent business. I don't have any urgent business. So can I just thank everybody for attending the meeting today. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nora.